Let's start.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone joining us today. I would like to welcome Keith Fernandez from the Mangalore subsection for joining us today. On behalf of the faculty, office bearers, and other executive members of IEEE NITK, I welcome our distinguished speaker of the day, Dr. SK Ramesh. SK Ramesh is a renowned engineering educator with over 3 decades of leadership experience as a dean, department chair, and faculty member in the California State University system. He is presently a professor of electrical and computer engineering at California State University, Northridge, and founding director of CSU Northridge's internationally recognized AIMS2 program that mentors and supports Latino, Latina students, and underrepresented minorities in engineering. Earlier, he served as dean of CSUN's College of Engineering and Computer Science from 2006 to 17. The programs he established serve industry practitioners in high wage, high demand fields, including renewable energy, assistive technology, and advanced manufacturing. Dr. Ramesh has been an active volunteer for 38 years and has served in several leadership roles on the IEEE Board of Directors, IEEE HKN Board of Governors, ABET Board of Directors, and as IEEE's representative on ABET Board of Delegates. As 2016-17 Vice President of Educational Activities, he championed collaboration, diversity, and inclusive excellence through innovative programs like IEEE Learning Network, ILN, IEEE HKN, the Electrical Engineering Honor Society, expanded to serve all 10 regions of IEEE under his leadership as the 2016 IEEE HKN President. Ramesh is an IEEE Fellow recognized for contributions to entrepreneurship in engineering education, and his research interests cover high speed optical communication systems, devices, and electronic circuit design. His many recognitions include the John Guerra Engineering Educator of the Year, William Johnson International Award for Leadership and Contributions to the Profession, and the IEEE Region 6 Community Service Award. He covets his service as an IEEE Student Branch Counselor, 16 years, and several years as SEC in the Sacramento section and the Central area in IEEE Region 6, among his favorite volunteer roles in IEEE. Before we start, I request all of you to post any questions that you have on the Zoom chat window or the YouTube live chat. We will be addressing these questions at the end of the talk. With that, I hand over to Dr. Ramesh to begin his talk on engineering the future in the post COVID era.
Great. A very warm good evening to all of you at NIT Suratko. Professor Bhatt, Ms. Arpita, thank you very much for that introduction. I look forward to sharing some ideas with you today on the 4th of October here in California, which is where I live. And this is an auspicious day because we're celebrating two events, right? The 2nd of October marked the 151st birth anniversary of the father of our nation, Mahatma Gandhi. And as Mahatma Gandhi ji said, be the change you wish to see in this world. And IEEE, as a global technical organization, is certainly doing its part advancing technology for humanity. The other event is related to the IEEE's own history. The very first meeting of the IEEE took place in 1884. And back then, of course, it wasn't the IEEE, it was the Institute of Radio Engineers and so forth. So every year we celebrate IEEE Day, commemorating that occasion, which is going to be happening on the 6th of October. So we're sort of equidistant between the 2nd of October and the 6th of October. So I'm very glad to be coming to you today to share some thoughts with you. So thank you again for the opportunity. I'm going to begin sharing my screen momentarily. So if somebody could just give me a thumbs up and let me know when you see it. Here. There we go. Are we good? Great. Thank you very much. And I'm going to put it in presentation mode and off we go. Very good. So engineering the future in the post-COVID era. So when Professor Bhatt reached out to me, I was thinking about the remarks that I wanted to share. And I think the gentleman in the middle of my screen needs no introduction. Everybody knows our former president, the late Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam. I was fortunate enough to meet Dr. Kalam in 2009. That photograph was taken in the courtyard at Caltech. where he was there to receive the von Karman Award, which is the highest award given to an aerospace scientist. And if you had the opportunity to meet Professor Kalam or Dr. Kalam, he's a very down-to-earth human being, first and foremost. And you don't get the feeling that you're talking to the president of the largest republic in this world. And not only that, he truly cares about you as an individual. So in the few minutes of conversation that I had, we talked about engineering education in India. We talked about IEEE. We talked about what we as engineers could do to make a difference in this world. So with that as a preface, tell you briefly, Arpita told about the program that I'm leading. It's called AIM Squared. It stands for Attract, Inspire, Mentor, and Support Students. And it's a program that started about a decade ago to support students who are the first in their family to go to college. So many of these students come to my university, not even speaking English, their native language is Spanish. So if you can imagine these students coming into a university, studying different disciplines like commerce, business, and yes, engineering, and graduating in time and going back to serve their community, that truly is what I call the transformative power of higher education, which is something that Dr. Kalam truly believed in. So with that for inspiration, let me share one of the books that he's written. If you haven't read this, I'd recommend that you pick up India Vision 2020. We're already there. When I went to the event, I actually had his biography, Winds of Fire. So he was kind enough to autograph it for me. I'm from Chennai, so I speak Tamil. And I had a copy of the book in Tamil. So we had a great conversation in English and Tamil, and he signed that for me. But more to the point, as I read the book, Dr. Kalam talks about the areas of development that are critical from the Indian perspective: people, economy, strategic strength, and infrastructure. Then he goes on to talk about technology, saying technology is the answer. Now, I want to have you close your eyes for a moment and think about the mission of IEEE, advancing technology for humanity. So truly, that's in our DNA. We believe that technology is the answer. But if you read further, you find out that Dr. Kalam is all about access. So he said technology should not only be for the classes, but for the masses. So we need to provide accessible, affordable technology, which is what you're doing as students, as faculty, as researchers, as industry practitioners. So this is very inspiring for anyone who aspires to be an engineer or a computer scientist. Mind you, when we had this conversation in 2020, COVID-19 was nowhere on the horizon. As a matter of fact, even SARS had not come up yet, right? So we had a lot of different things that the world has gone through in the last few years, and particularly in the last 6 months, that have changed our entire perspective. So here's what I'd like to talk to you about today. But before I do that, I want to bring up yet another former president whom we lost, unfortunately, just a few weeks ago, Sri Pranab Mukherjee. And he was talking on the occasion of the birth centenary of Acharya Satish Chandra Mukherjee, who was a teacher and educationist of the 20th century. And you can look up the speech, it's from 2014. And during the speech, he said, if we can make the necessary effort by creating teams of inspired teachers, by establishing linkages with the global educational fraternity, through the maximum use of information technology, by placing emphasis on research, the results will follow. Open your eyes again and think back to the 4th of October, 2020, which is today. That's exactly what we're doing, ladies and gentlemen. So we're using information technology to connect. We're connecting faculty and students. We're inspiring faculty and students to make a difference in their work. So with those messages of inspiration, let's go to the topic of today, which is engineering the future in the post-COVID era. Because the world existed before COVID and the world will exist after COVID. What we need to understand is how we're going to adapt to the changes that have resulted from this pandemic that confronts us. So, oops, I didn't mean to go there. So that's the article. So, go there. Pardon me for a second while I get back. So here's what I'd like to talk to you about today. So we'll talk about the changing landscape, how things change so quickly. Then I want to talk about innovation and grand challenges, because truly this is a moment in time where innovation, I think, is going to play a critical part in our future development. Then I want to pivot and talk about IEEE's role, how IEEE as the largest professional technical society has a role to play, not only in addressing the challenges. At the same time, there's a saying that charity begins at home. So I want to talk to you about the resources that are available from IEEE to help our members first and foremost. Then a few examples from IEEE's humanitarian activities. Mr. Keith Fernandez signed in from the Mangalore subsection, and he was telling me on chat that he had a chance to meet with Bill Oakes. So I'll talk about the EPICS and IEEE program, particularly in India. We'll talk about IEEE Smart Village and a few closing comments putting it all together. So that's the plan for the next half an hour or so. So thinking about a changing landscape, I teach at a university. I've been teaching at the California State University now for over 3 decades. And if you walked into any one of our campuses before the 12th of March 2020, you would have probably seen something like this. In fact, you might have seen something like this at NIT Surathkal, where you had students who are freely talking to one another, who have their laptops open. Yes, some of them are listening to YouTube music and videos and whatnot, and some of them are actually downloading lesson plans or accessing materials they need for their classes. But we had a world that was very accessible. We had a world where there was no restriction. There were no borders. People were jumping on planes, trains, automobiles, going to conferences, going to meetings. Festivals were happening, weddings were happening. So it was a very open and very free world that we lived in before the 12th of March 2020. Then in the space of literally 1 week, my campus, like a lot of other campuses, went virtual. Now, this picture is not intended to show you the future, but all I'm saying is this is what happened, figuratively speaking. So we were still connected. So all these students that you saw on the lawn are still taking classes. My entire system, we have about 500,000 students in my system, largest public university in the United States, for the fall semester and for the duration of the spring semester from the 12th of March, went completely virtual, which meant labs, lectures, discussions, everything we did before COVID-19 now had to be delivered in a virtual format. Now, we're also going to be virtual all the way through next June of 2021 because we want to keep people safe. So the question is, how are we going to adapt to these changes? And the faculty, the students are showing remarkable grit, remarkable persistence, remarkable determination in adapting to these changes that are confronting us. So what is the role of innovation with the grand challenges that confront us? So by way of a preface, I want to share with you this article or book, really. You can download it from the National Academy of Engineering. If you go to nae.org, that's the United States National Academy of Engineering. Now, this was published in 2008 when there was a concern in the United States that we were not attracting enough students to the STEM disciplines, whether it's biology, whether it's chemistry, physics, engineering, computer science, etc. Not enough people are coming into the STEM disciplines. So the National Academy of Engineering set about talking to people in the field to see how we could inspire more students to pursue STEM careers in general, and engineering and computer science in particular as a future career option. So some words are very important here. In the preface of the book, they say no profession unleashes the spirit of innovation like engineering. From research to real-world applications, engineers are constantly discovering how to improve our lives by creating bold new solutions that connect science to life in unexpected forward-thinking ways. And few professions turn so many ideas into so many realities. But ladies and gentlemen, the next line is very important to me in the context of where we are today. Few have such a direct and positive impact on people's everyday lives. I'll repeat that. Few have such a direct and positive impact on people's everyday lives. So if you're a student in the IEEE Student Branch at NITK, in any discipline, right, listening to this, understand, be aware that the work that you're going to do in the future is going to have an impact on humanity. So we are counting on you, we are counting on your imaginations to help us meet the needs of the 21st century. So the challenges are many, right? Even before COVID-19, we were living in a very crowded world. So climate change is very real. So we needed to look at energy. We needed to look at sustainability. Yesterday, I spoke at a conference organized by the IEEE India Council and the IEEE Vizag Bay section, which was called Smart and Sustainable, the Decade Ahead. And my remarks there were focused on energy research and sustainability. Food and water are very important. When you think about 2/3 of the world's population that needs access to clean water and nutritious food. Healthcare, that has risen to the top right now as a result of the pandemic. Transportation, I live in LA, and in LA, it's not a land of distances, it's a land of time. Because somebody would tell me, Dr. Ramesh, we want you to come and give a talk. And I'd ask them, where are you located? They'd say, oh, we're only 15 miles away. 15 miles in Los Angeles could take you 2.5 hours, right? Because of the traffic. the congestion. So we need to find solutions. But the key to all of this is education. And if you're thinking about the National Academy of Engineering back in 2008, we are counting on engineers and their imagination to take us forward in the 21st century. So now more than ever, I think it's important for us to be thinking about this. So I'll give you a couple of other documents for perspective. The books that you see on the screen in front of you, the two on the bookends, literally, are written by Tom Friedman. The one on the far left was written many, many years ago. And no, he's not talking about flat earthers when he says the world is flat. He's really talking about how the technologies have made it seamless so that you could be in Bangalore, you could be in Surathkal, I could be in Los Angeles, we can all be connected and having this conversation. So he talked about how this was enabling business, how this was enabling the pace of globalization. Then a few years later, he wrote a book called Hot, Flat, and Crowded, because now he had pivoted to the point where as we go into this new economy with this rapid globalization, we need to be concerned about the demands that we are placing on our fossil fuels because they're not unlimited, right? We need to be thinking about renewable sources of energy. We need to be thinking about pollution so that future generations can in fact live a safe, clean, affordable life as they go forward. Now, the two books in the middle are both available from the National Academy of Engineering, freely available. If you go to nae.org, you can download them. And it says Engineer of 2020 and Educating the Engineer of 2020. So as you can guess, these books were written a few years ago. So at that time, the faculty in the United States, industry in the United States, were really having a conversation from a very holistic perspective. So let's say you're studying electrical engineering or mechanical engineering. How do we go about educating you beyond just your discipline? So you need to be a good problem solver. You need to be having critical thinking skills. You need to be able to work with people who speak different languages. And yes, you need to have cognitive diversity. So there might be people who have different ideas than you, and you need to be able to disagree with them without being disagreeable, if that makes sense, right? So these are all great ideas, but I believe the one idea that is really important here is that while we have tremendous diversity across this planet, it's very important that we work to be inclusive, because with inclusion comes strength, with inclusion comes innovation. So I put this together and talk about innovation with a different framework. In other words, when you talk to any entrepreneur, they would tell you they try a number of different things because before they find something that really works. In fact, very successful entrepreneurs who started companies that have made a difference in our lives would tell you that by trial and error, they were not afraid to fail, but they tried very many different things before they finally came upon the solution. Now we're in a situation with COVID-19 where we have to race ahead to find a vaccine. So you have high performance computing scientists who are working with doctors, who are working with epidemiologists around the world, looking at these mind-boggling number of combinations, 10 raised to 40 combinations, to see which one of those combinations can provide an antiviral drug, which will lead us forward to find a cure for COVID-19. The best estimates say it might take another 12 to 18 months. But the challenge that we face is that we need to do this innovation, but we need to innovate through adversity. So it's all well and good to say, food is plentiful, you have clean water, clean air, you have all the resources you need. Now go ahead and innovate. Now we're in a situation where we're under lockdown and we have to innovate through adversity. That in a way defines a critical value that I believe all engineers and computer scientists need to keep in their core, and especially if you're an IEEE member, which is resilience, which is also a Gandhian value, which is you bounce back. You're not deterred by failures. So some of the things that I've learned from my students, I told you about the AIM Squared students. So when we pivoted to virtual realities, my students, like all of you, were wondering, how are we going to do labs? How are we going to be able to submit our assignments? And one by one, we've started to solve those problems. For example, our labs are now accessible remotely. So students can actually log in for wherever they are and manipulate the equipment in the lab remotely using a variety of tools. We use National Instruments, we use MATLAB, and we use different platforms. We use some tools from HP to give them access to high performance computing. But you see, that by itself is not enough, because what if you don't have access to the internet? What if you don't have access to electric power? So there are so many challenges to overcome. But the key to overcoming those challenges is in your minds, right? So rather than having a fixed mindset that says that, no, we are doomed, we have no way to get out of this, is to have a growth mindset and say, well, here's a challenge. That's what engineers do all the time. You're tossed a challenge, you know what the resources are, and you try to find a solution with the best available resources. And then be humble enough to understand that as the resources advance, As time advances, we can now come up with better solutions, right? Better opportunities to educate our engineers to solve the same problems. So having a growth mindset, I think, is very, very important. The article reference is right there in case you're interested. It was written by Susie Flynn, and she talks about how students come together. One of my students actually shared this with me this summer. And so I said, this is a great idea, and I wanted to share this with audiences around the world. The other things that I want to put in front of you are looking at failure as the other side of the coin. In other words, unless you try, you're never going to know. So failure is not the opposite of success, but it's part of success. And it's only a learning experience. And every step of the way, you learn something that advances you as an individual, that advances you as a group, and eventually you're able to use this information to make a difference in your community, right? So grand challenges and innovation, innovating in the face of adversity, demonstrating resilience. These are all important characteristics that we wish to see going forward as we engineer the future in a post-COVID world. So where do we begin? Where do we start, right? So you say, Ramesh, these are very good. This is a 30,000 foot view. You've inspired us, but where do we start? So as engineers, we're also very practical. We're very realistic. So we know there's lockdowns. We know we're all working from home, those of us that can. That has slowed down the spread of the virus. We also know that we're sitting in Zoom meetings, Lord knows. I mean, I've been sitting on 10 to 15 hours a day sometimes online in meetings and conferences and webinars and so forth, interacting with people. But what I heard from all of these conversations is the need for humanity to stay connected, right? And IEEE makes it happen. As the world's largest professional technical society, we are playing an integral role. We'll continue to play an integral role in keeping everyone connected, not just the engineers, but everyone connected. Think about kindergarten students who are now using Zoom lessons. Think about graduate students who are doing their PhD using Zoom lessons, right? So technology is very, very critical. At the same time, from the perspective of controlling the disease, we're very interested in testing. We're very interested in tracing. We have an outbreak right now in the United States that has affected the president of the United States. So there is a tremendous interest in looking at controlling this disease. What can we do to ensure that we keep the population at large safe? There's a large economic impact. Lots of retail industries, lots of service industries, tourism, the hotel industry, transportation industry, many of them have been affected. They're struggling, right? We are fortunate that we still have a job and we're able to work. So a lot of questions come up, and I keep putting this innovating in the face of adversity, namely resilience, in the back of your mind, because we can't be deterred by these failures. So the questions that come up when I go to sleep is, how do we rebuild? What do we rebuild? And sometimes people say, how do we get back? How do we get back? So one thought that I'd put in your mind is to erase the notion of getting back. So that is a world that existed March 12th of 2020. We are here on October 4th of 2020, and the only way is to go forward, not to go back. When we emerge from post-COVID is to look forward. So now the question is, what can we rebuild, right? So we have an opportunity literally to wipe the slate clean and say, what can we rebuild as we go forward? And that, ladies and gentlemen, I would argue is an innovation-based economy. So some thoughts come to mind, right? The challenges and opportunities, we've talked about them. We've talked about how even before COVID-19, to give you a statistic, the unemployment in the United States was about 5%. So we have roughly 160 million jobs. So we have 5% unemployment. With COVID-19, certain industry sectors have been hit very hard. So unemployment is running north of 15%. Some are predicting it might go to 20%. Around the world, if you look at the jobs, there's about 800 million jobs. 20% of that, that's a large number of people who are out of jobs. What can we do to provide employment? Because without employment, you don't have economic development. Without economic development, you don't have access to healthcare, to communications, and all these wonderful things that we talked about, the grand challenges that we need to solve. So the opportunities for us are now that we have an opportunity because we're sitting at home, we're locked down, is to think about sustainability, right? Sustainability from a very local perspective. Again, I remind you of IEEE's mission. Advancing technology for humanity is a very global mission, but let's look at our own community. How do we make an impact at Suratko? What kind of clean energy, renewable energy sources can we think about so we're putting less of a demand on the grid? How can we solve the transportation problem safely so people can commute? Eventually, when a safe vaccine is developed and deployed, we will begin to see the transportation industry coming back again. How do we develop smart cities, smart grid, digital technologies? You think about testing, tracing, and control. Artificial intelligence plays a big part. Internet of Things plays a big part. 5G, machine learning. But all of these technologies by themselves don't hold a solution. What needs to happen is the confluence of these technologies all coming together through our work, through our contributions, yet to be determined to engineer the future. So rather than look at these challenges as being, uh, you know, really points for failure, we look at these challenges as opportunities for the future to go ahead. So how do we future-proof this world, right? So the first thing that comes to my mind is going back to our core values. And one of those core values to me is trust. And trust begins with openness, trust begins with transparency, trust begins with respect, right? Think about the world today and think about the world that existed before March 12th of 2020. Think about all the communications that we're having despite the national boundaries. People all over the world are talking to one another, trying to find a way to advance forward, trying to find a way to make a difference. Whether you're creating personal protection equipment, whether you're creating ventilators to help the aged, whether you're doing testing, tracing, and control, right? All of these begin with trust. And IEEE, as the world's largest professional technical society, will have a tremendous role to play in this new world, okay? The other thing that I think about is, again, this sense of vulnerability, right? So right now, we're all wondering, when this is going to happen. At the same time, we need to remember that our time on this planet is limited, and we have a responsibility to steward this planet so that future generations, our children, our grandchildren, have a safe and affordable place to live in, right? So in a small way, this microbe, corona and COVID-19, has brought home the point that we need to be in balance with nature, that everything that we do has a consequence. So we need to be thinking about the impact that we need to make on the world. This, I think, is an important principle. And if it were left to ourselves, hypothetically, we may have never gotten there on our own, right? We would have said, oh yeah, it's going to happen. It's a bad movie that I watched, but here it is. It's actually happening in front of us. The other thing that I see is being grateful, because I see tremendous value right here, because when you trust, when you share, and you're grateful, you make a difference in everybody's lives. And this is something that my students have taught me. This is something that I'm witnessing every single day as I go about my daily life. Last but not the least, I think it's very important for us to think about ethics. While we talk about these great technologies, artificial intelligence, machine learning, etc., to test, trace, and control, we also need to ensure that the ethics of autonomous and intelligent systems is firmly in our minds, because we do not want these technologies to be used in any way, shape, or form to harm humanity, right? That is our responsibility. We need to be fair, we need to be ethical, we need to be inclusive, we need to be collaborative. So more on that later. So last piece of inspiration. This is one of my favorite poets, Maya Angelou. And if you read Maya's words, she's got some beautiful, beautiful ideas that I think are very pertinent to the conversation we're having today. And this is a line that really inspires me. She says, lift up your hearts. Each new hour holds new chances for new beginnings. So rather than thinking back about what happened before March 12th and going back to the world that existed, lift up your hearts and just know that each new hour holds new chances for new beginnings. Something else she also said is, we may suffer many defeats, but we must not be defeated. So she's talking about the human spirit there, okay? So with this for background, with this for perspective, let's talk about IEEE's role, right? What does IEEE have to do with engineering the future? Because it's really not about the future of engineering. It's about engineering the future. Right? Now, you all know that IEEE has a global reach. We have over 400,000 members spread over 160 countries, numerous technical societies and conferences and so forth, and about 125,000 students. This is important, right? We have young professionals, graduate students, and students who are part of IEEE. I started out as a founding member of the student branch at what was then REC Trichy, which is now NIT Trichy, back in 1978. Technical breadth. You think about the IEEE, over 1,900 conferences, and you ask what happened to these conferences after COVID-19. A lot of them are going on as if nothing has happened because we turned to virtual modalities. ICASP, the International Conference on Speech and Signal Processing, usually attracts about 2,000 or 3,000 members. This year, we made it free. It's completely virtual. We had 16,000 attendees. What is more interesting to me is that out of the 16,000, over 13,000 of them are not even members of IEEE, right? There is a very interesting piece of information there. So somehow there's 13,000 people out there in the world who are not members of IEEE who logged into ICASP. Well, maybe they were just bored and they said, oh, here's a webinar. But whatever it is, right, IEEE is offering that value. Women in Engineering, same thing. They had over 10,000 attending their conference. Virtual Reality 2020. So many conferences that are happening in hybrid and virtual form. Over 5 million technical documents. I'll show you how we can access some of these. You look at the top periodicals in electrical engineering. 23 of the top 25 periodicals are from IEEE's fields of interest, are in IEEE stable. Last but not the least, standards. If you turn on a switch, this communication that we're having is a result of the IEEE standards that we're utilizing today. But perhaps the most important role that IEEE plays is with its social impact. The impact that we have on global public policy, on global humanitarian efforts, which I think has risen to the forefront, continuing education, I already talked to you about ethics. So all of this, ladies and gentlemen, are part of IEEE's mission. It's part of our vision. And if you look at our strategic plan that I'll discuss with you in a minute, advancing technology for humanity is grounded on these two principles: technological innovation, benefit for humanity. Now, we will be essential to the global technical community. That's our vision, right? We will be essential to technical professionals, whether you're an industry person, whether you're a faculty member, whether you're a student, no matter what your age, IEEE has a home for you. And we will be universally recognized for the contributions of technology to improving global conditions. Think again to engineering the future in the post-COVID era. This is the time for IEEE. This is your time to make a difference, to engineer the future. Now, to put this more in perspective, I want to show you the goals, IEEE strategic goals, but more importantly, I want to show you the core values of IEEE. Remember, all of this was written before COVID-19, right? Trust, service to humanity, integrity in action, global community building, growth and nurturing, partnership. Think about future-proofing the worlds that I talked about: trust, openness, being grateful, being sharing, lifting up your hearts, not being defeated. All of these are integral to our DNA, integral to IEEE's strategic mission. Furthermore, when I gave you that statistic of over 13,000 non-members attending an IEEE virtual conference, they're coming to us because we are a trusted source of educational service. We are providing opportunities for career and professional development. In other words, they believe by coming to the IEEE, they can actually advance themselves, they can actually engineer the future in a post-COVID world, right? So IEEE is going to be very important in the post-COVID world, not only just for all of us as members, but for our future members and non-members as well. Okay. So what are the resources available from IEEE? This is all well and good. This is how IEEE can contribute to making a difference. But right now, this is right now in the present, what is available from IEEE. So I put together a couple of slides to show you that. So if you were to go to IEEE.org and just type in COVID-19 IEEE resources, that's a static link, you would actually find this on the IEEE Spectrum site. So you click on this link, it takes you to this page, which shows you lots of different things: virtual events, dispatches, FAQs, there's a few articles. And then if you look in the top right-hand corner right here, it talks about free resources, right? So I clicked on that, and that took me to this page. What struck me when I went to this page is that it just did not spit out a whole set of links and information and so on. It provided the information in the context of the end user. So it said, I'm a practicing engineer, I'm an educator, I'm a parent, I'm a researcher, I'm a student. So depending on where you're looking at IEEE, right, you could click on one of these links, or if you're lazy, you could just click on all and see what comes up, which is exactly what I did. I said, let me just click on all and see what comes up. Well, here's what came up: continuing education, free ebooks, and free resources for homeschooling. So any student members on the call, if you have younger siblings who are going to school, IEEE has a tremendous portal called Try Engineering. Go to Try Engineering. There are lesson plans for students from ages 4 through 18. There's opportunities for the counselors. There's opportunities for parents to understand how to teach and how to work in these new virtual modalities. So check it out. But I want to talk to you about continuing education and ebooks, because that I think is relevant to the students and faculty on this. So I clicked on continuing education, and what popped up there is a link to the IEEE Learning Network. Now, I was vice president for IEEE educational activities about 5 years ago, 2016-17. And at that time, as I was talking to members around the world, one of the things that I heard from members is they're not able to find any information. I'm interested in robotics, or I'm interested in power, I'm interested in communications, but I have to search all over the place before I can find an article, before I can find what I'm looking for. And That is a very honest criticism of the IEEE. We have an ocean of information, 5 million technical documents, but it's really hard to try and find the things that you need when you need it. So we went back to the drawing board on educational activities with the members and volunteers, and I went back to the technical societies. Remember, IEEE has 46 technical societies. I'm a member of 2 of them, Photonic Society and Education Society. So I went back to the societies and said, look, we have great content, but is there a way for us to create a one-stop shop, a portal, so that if you're an IEEE member, just like we saw on the previous page, whether you're a student, practicing engineer, parent, etc., and all you care about is the information that you need at that point in time. So you shouldn't have to go to the Robotics and Automation Society page to find what you need. You shouldn't have to go to the Power and Energy Society page to find what you need. You shouldn't have to go to the Communication and Signal Processing page to find what you need. Instead, you should say, I'm interested in developing an app for testing, tracing, and control. And you just type that in, and lo and behold, you get the resources you need to develop the app that you need, right? That is the kind of network that we need to create. So it took a lot of trust. It took a lot of openness. We had to talk about the financial side of things, how this would all be deployed. So over a period of 2 years, with funding from the IEEE New Initiatives Committee, we created the IEEE Learning Network. So if you go to iln.ieee.org, there's tremendous resources. We just celebrated our first year, but it took collaboration, it took communication to make that happen. For example, if you're a student right now, there are a number of courses that are being offered relatively inexpensively. Now, I recognize that $10 is a lot of money in some parts of the world, but ladies and gentlemen, the IEEE is really, really trying hard to make these accessible, to make them affordable to you. And it's simply covering the cost of production of these resources. If you're a faculty member, in the last week of July, we actually hosted a virtual conference on how you teach and how you learn remotely. This is available on demand. It's available free. You don't have to pay anything. You can access it. Once again, go to iln.ieee.org if you're interested in any of these courses. If you're interested in books, if you're old-fashioned like me, I still have printed books on my bookshelf, and I like to read books. Well, one of the things that the IEEE did is to make our ebooks available to our members. So if you go to IEEE Explore and click on ebooks, that's a screen that you'll see. Click on Classics. The last time I checked, I found 373 ebooks that are freely available for download. If you just close your eyes for a moment and you download and read all of these books, you'll still have 8 books left over after 1 year, right? If you read a book a day, you'll still have 8 books left over after 1 year. So lots and lots of resources, both publications, IEEE Learning Network, books, and so on, webinars that you can take advantage of, no matter who you are in the IEEE, student, graduate student, young professional, etc. Last but not the least, we have many researchers who are actually working on COVID-19 related technologies. These have been made completely freely available by the IEEE to anybody who wants them. So we're not just talking about the articles, we're actually talking about the data sets. So if you're working on a ventilator design, let's say, and you want to make it better, you can actually go in there and say ventilator design, download all the articles, collaborate with whomever you wish. We have Collaboratech as a platform. All of this is freely available. So IEEE has plenty of resources to support you as you engineer the future going forward. I talked about ILN. We're just celebrating our first year. Very proud of that effort. It's a collaborative effort. We're adding more societies, more content to it. So if you have ideas for content, again, send them on to educational activities. I'm sure they'd appreciate hearing from you. I then want to talk to you about entrepreneurship, because this is another community that really speaks to IEEE mission. And when I think about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, I feel that this is at the confluence of where IEEE entrepreneurship and humanitarian activities meet, so that we're talking about technology for the benefit of humanity. So the IEEE entrepreneurship community, it's a community, it's not a society, is to foster entrepreneurial engineering and technological innovation for the benefit of humanity. So currently, it brings together business and society. So if you have an idea that you want to do a startup company, you want to make a difference, you can be a part of this. And remember, you don't even have to be an IEEE member. In fact, I believe out of the 17,000 or so participants in this community, more than 10,000 of them are not even IEEE members. We hope that eventually they'll become IEEE members, seeing the value that this community brings to them. There's speakers, there's panels, there's entrepreneurship pitching competitions. knowledge for innovation, so many different things that I'm showing you on the slide right there. But take advantage of all of these to make a difference, right? So these are all, I think, critical resources for you. The last part of my talk I want to describe to you is engaging through IEEE's humanitarian activities. So there are two areas that I want to describe to you. One of them is IEEE Smart Village. And IEEE Smart Village goes back to this notion of access. Because while we're working on all these advanced technologies, fundamentally, we need to provide electricity. Because without power, if you don't have access to electricity, you don't have access to the rest of the things that you need to advance economically, education, entrepreneurship, etc. So Smart Village was started about 10 years ago, co-founded by Ray Larson. IEEE is a big part of that. In fact, if you're interested, one of our signature programs was featured on the National Geographic channel called Breakthrough, where we had a group of engineers working with the Global Himalayan Expedition who established a DC microgrid up in the Himalayas. It was a monastery in Lingashed, about 14,500 feet. But these engineers and humanitarian activists carried these panels, took all the equipment up there, established a DC microgrid, and brought power to that community so that they can in turn have access to education, etc. So we've been doing this around the world. The goal of the IEEE Smart Village is to impact over 50 million people by 2025, right? It connects entrepreneurs, it connects engineers and education to make a difference. There have been many projects. Obviously, there's been projects in Africa, there's been projects in India, and the Smart Village, again, is another way for you to think about engineering the future when you think about IEEE's humanitarian efforts. The other program I want to mention to you, because a number of you are familiar with EPICS. EPICS stands for Engineering Projects in Community Service. Started out at Purdue University under the leadership of the dean at that time, Dr. Leah Jamieson, who's also one of our former IEEE presidents, and the director, Dr. Bill Oakes, who runs the program, is a dear friend of mine. So EPICS in IEEE engages university students in hands-on projects to solve problems in their local community. Again, think about COVID-19, think about the challenges in your local community, and EPICS and IEEE's humanitarian activities could play a very critical role here. So we have 4 pillars: access and abilities, education and outreach, environment, and human services. And you can apply for funding in any one of these areas. If you go to epics.ieee.org, you can actually find a number of the projects that are being funded. You can actually find a number of the examples around the world of how this is happening. Now, key to this, I told you, is engaging university students with pre-university students, because IEEE had this idea that not only do we need to solve problems in the community, we also need to inspire the younger generation, whether they're in high school, middle school, etc., to be a part of this so that they can see the opportunities in STEM careers and engineering as they come together. And then at the top of the pyramid, we said we need to have a nonprofit organization. The nonprofit organization is there so that once this project is done, it is sustainable and it can be carried forward, right? So this is the EPICS model. It has been going on for well over a decade, a number of different projects around the world. Now, as we started thinking about this, and when I was VP for Education again, I wanted to go beyond just the individual projects. So we had a brainstorming session. We were seeing a lot of projects from India. And we said, what if we were to create university partnerships in India? So the idea here is to go beyond the individual EPICS projects, but actually develop partnerships with individual universities to address 2 things. One, specific needs within their curriculum, and make service learning an integral part of their community. So if you're a student at NIT Suratko and you look around your local community and you see a lot of problems that are there to solve, well, when you come in as a first-year student, this is a part of your curriculum. So no matter what course you're taking, there will be a service learning component. Maybe you do the assessment in the first year, you do the evaluation in the second year, the third year is design, and then the fourth year is actually delivering the project. But this is going to be happening every year for every student across the university, across the program. So we really wanted to make this sustainable beyond the individual project scope of EPICS. So the model, again, was to work with Purdue, work with EPICS and IEEE, and work with universities in India who were committed to making a change in their curriculum. So a number of universities stepped up. We actually had an MOU signing ceremony in New Jersey. This was in 2018. That's Professor Bill Oakes with me. along with volunteers from India, Professor Krishna Vaidula, who's another gentleman who started IUCEE over a decade ago, Indo-Universal Collaboration for Engineering Education, again, to make a difference. And all of these principals and faculty from these universities coming together saying, yes, we will make a change in our curriculum to make service learning and project-based learning an integral part of our students' experience. I went back to NIT, my campus, in May of 2018 to sign the MOU. That's with the director of NIT, Professor Thomas, and the two champions from NIT, Professor Raghavan, who's since retired, and Professor Bhakta, who's leading the initiative, as well as the student branch chair and the chair of electrical engineering from NIT Trichy. So a number of universities are participating in this. These are the schools that you see in front of you. And the goal here, again, is for each of these universities to make this an integral part of their curriculum, right? Unlike the individual EPICS projects, now we're talking about projects that span the university, that span the curriculum across multiple years. So to begin with, we provide some initial seed funding. There's a lot of consultation with the faculty, with the EPICS committee, and we help them with the curriculum. At my university, or my alma mater at NIT Trichy, we said we need to set up a lab. So I'm from the class of 1981. I graduated in 1981. So the alumni from my batch, even before EPICS and IEEE initiative had started, gathered together, we raised funds, and we set up an IoT lab at NIT Trichy. And we turned it over to the university so that they can use it for all students who work on service learning projects with this new initiative, right? So these are the kind of things that we can do sustainably in our own backyard. So how do we put it all together? Before I go there, I want to show you the impact of EPICS, right? This is the EPICS and IEEE project. I'm not talking about the India initiative. This is the EPICS and IEEE project where we've invested a lot of money. The average project size is about $5,000. What strikes me the most is that over a third of the students participating are women. 42% of the pre-university students participating are women. This is important to me because when I look at engineering the future in a post-COVID world, diversity is important, inclusion is important, equity is very, very important. And EPICS does a great job of providing opportunities to strengthen all three of those values. So putting it all together, right? So what are the skill sets needed, right? If you're a student today, undergraduate student, graduate student, if you're a faculty today, what are the skill sets needed for the jobs of the future? From what you've heard so far, I think it's very evident that teamwork is important. It's very evident that one discipline by itself is not going to make a difference. We need to be interdisciplinary. We also need to be diverse and inclusive. Systems thinking. This is something that I emphasize to my students all the time. You know, if you're building a sensor, if you're building a power system, if you're building a computer, whatever it is you're building, think about what the interfaces are. Think about it holistically, about how it is going to be used. Think about ethics. We also need to be thinking about sustainability. We need to be thinking about lifetimes. We need to be thinking about cross-cultural sensitivities. In other words, global challenges with local impact. And then the realities of global innovation, because right now, without transportation, you know, the innovation might be happening in one part of the world. The actual product may need to be delivered in a different part of the world. How are we going to bridge this gap, right? So we need answers to these kinds of questions. We need engineers who can compete, but more important, collaborate globally. Above all, engineering the future is about addressing societal needs. And the key to that, again, I'll emphasize, is inclusion, diversity, and equity. So collaboration, as I've emphasized to you many times in my remarks so far, is critical to our success. IEEE is doing a remarkable job of collaboration with the conferences, ILN, so many different things, right? And in a way, this came to life for me at a board meeting about maybe 4 years ago, 2017. And we had invited young professionals from around the world to the board meeting because we were revising a strategic plan and we wanted to take the inputs from the young professionals to advance IEEE's strategic goals. And we were in a break from the meeting and one of the students said pyramid, right? And I want to show you what happened when they said pyramid. We were in a coffee break and I'm talking to a group of students and somebody says pyramid. Well, this is what happened, right? These students gathered, they formed a human pyramid. So at the base of the pyramid, you had some, you know, three really strong individuals. We had a middle layer here, and then we had somebody else who jumped up. But they did this all seamlessly. And the one word they said was human pyramid, right? But there was collaboration, there was communication, there was teamwork, and they all came together. You might actually recognize some of them. Sarang Sheikh, who's on top, is from Pakistan. Ramesh Nair at that time was from the IEEE Kerala section. He's now moved to the US. He works for Intel. He's in Region 6. Mario Milosevic was in Region 7 from Canada. He's now moved to Orange County, finished his PhD. Flavia Denka on the right here is the chair of young professionals. Jennifer from Colombia. She's now in Australia working on a PhD in Melbourne. You have so many different people from all over the world. Sally from Kenya, right, coming together. But the one word they said pyramid, and all this happened in the twinkling of an eye, right? That to me is collaboration. That collaboration, that spirit of trust, openness that we talk about, this is key to our future. This is what we need to engineer the future. Something else that I learned, when I started as vice president, my predecessor was Professor Saurabh Sinha from the University of Johannesburg. He's the deputy vice chancellor there. And he'd always begin our meetings with an African proverb. And I want to share that with you. And it says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. Go together. And IEEE is all about going together, because we all have ideas, and some ideas may work, some ideas may not work, but we have to go together. So collaboration, again, is critical to our success. So where are we headed? I'll ask you rhetorically again. We are headed to a future where we are demonstrating resilience in the face of adversity. We're innovating in the face of adversity. And we're doing all of this to answer this question. And I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask you nevertheless. Do you want to make a difference in this world, right? And I believe the answer from every member of IEEE, past, present, and future, is going to be unequivocally, unabashedly, yes, we want to make a difference. Tell us how, right? And how can we do it? Well, I do it by connecting with young people. This is from our Tri-Engineering Summer Institute, where we invite high school students to come and work on hands-on projects 2 years ago when we were face-to-face. And in that audience, I was talking to students who wanted to be artists. I was talking to students who wanted to be race car drivers. Some of them wanted to be neuroscientists and astronauts. And yes, some of them wanted to be electrical engineers. But the one thing they all had in common was to make a difference in this world, right? That is the key to engineering the future. How can we do it? Well, they're not too far away. We need to be inclusive. We need to be collaborative. We need to be accountable. We need to be resilient. We need to be ethical. And I call that I care. But as I think more and more about it, it's not enough just to care, because right now we need to do this with a sense of urgency. There is no room for complacency. So you almost want to flip those letters and say, I race. So you want to be inclusive, resilient, accountable, collaborative, and ethical. So ladies and gentlemen, it has been a real pleasure speaking with all of you today. Sight is what lies in front of us. Vision is what lies ahead, in the immortal words of our great president, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam. So in a post-COVID world, we don't do fist bumps. We put our hands together and say thank you, just like this. So thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm going to stop sharing my screen at this point, and I would invite any questions, conversations that we can have for as long as you want to talk. So thank you very much again for the opportunity.
Thank you, Professor Ramesh. Now we will move on to question and answer session. Diksha, can you please go ahead with the Q&A?
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you, Ramesh, sir. That was a very informative talk. We have a couple of questions to ask, and let's start with your experience. How has IEEE helped you in your academia field and in your studies and further in your career?
Great. Thank you so much, Diksha, for the question, and thank you to the gentleman from the or lady from the audience for the question. I told you that I started my life in IEEE as a student branch member in 1978. And at that time, I had no idea about IEEE. In fact, if you asked me about publications and so forth, I had no idea. We used to go to the library to pick up books and journals and so forth. Incidentally, Trichy, like Surathkal, was very warm. And the library was the coolest place, I mean, literally and figuratively on campus, because you go to the basement of the library, it's very cool, there's fans there. So it's a good way to get away. And by the way, you can also read publications. So I used to pick up a copy of Spectrum right there and start reading them. But jokes aside, a group of students, we were in ECE at that time, computers were just coming of age. And we said, what can we do as students to bring this to all students in our community? And someone said, hey, maybe you can join the IEEE. Maybe you can form a student branch. So we inquired into it. We started a student branch, but we didn't stop there, right? We said, we need to do something more. So we actually did our own newsletter called Bandwidth, believe it or not, right? We were in ECE. And back then there were no printers. So we had Nobody on this call, maybe Professor Butt might remember them, but we had machines called cyclostyling machines. So you type them up on a typewriter, load it up on a drum, which is loaded with ink. You run off the copies, you staple them. So I was the assistant editor in my third year. By the time I went to my final year, I was the editor. So I had a lot of inspiration from IEEE as a student branch member. And the reason why I went to graduate school was because of IEEE. So I got into photonics, fiber optic communications was coming of age. And literally, as I began to swim in this ocean, literally I realized how broad of an ocean IEEE was. So I got into photonics. That led me to my career as an educator. I looked at all the resources available to educators, professors, faculty, etc. So here I am, I'm running for president of IEEE, and every one of you can do that. You can start out as a student member, and each one of you can indeed run for the IEEE highest level office. So I would say IEEE has a power unlike any other society to bring the technical, the professional, the service learning together. We may not realize it all at once, but it reveals itself as you advance further. And the other thing that I'll tell you is that it's a very empowering organization. The more you give to it, the more you get back from it, right? I started out as a member. It enabled me as a volunteer, and it inspired me as a volunteer to give back to the community. Now I'm determined, right? I'm getting close to the end of my career. I'm determined to share what I've learned with future members and learn from them, right? We need to have that humility. So I'd say if you're not an IEEE member, sign up. Go to IEEE.org, sign up today. And you can do that online. Professor Butt will approve your application in just 10 seconds.
Thank you, sir. Next question will be asked by Chandran Nandkumar. Chandran, please unmute yourself and you may ask the question.
All right, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, you are, Chandra. Thank you. How are you?
All right. So I wanted to ask a question with respect to the sustainable development goals which we had covered, which personally I believe is extremely important. And I felt that as the United Nations, that was one of the most important contributions. So in one of the speeches by Malala Yousafzai, she said that the Sustainable Development Goal number 4 is the most important because through it we can achieve the rest. So I wanted to know, in your opinion, which other sustainable development goals are as important. I understand that there are certain sustainable development goals like climate change, and even with respect to sustainable buildings. These are ones which can be directly impacted by technology and its improvement. But what about ones which aren't completely related, like fighting inequality or with respect to fighting poverty? How do you think technology will be a great equalizer or help solve these issues?
Right. Thank you, Chandran. That is a very thoughtful question, and I really appreciate you bringing it up. So I'll begin with a local example, Chandran. So at my university, at Cal State University at Northridge, we have an Institute for Sustainability, right? And the Institute for Sustainability spans all the disciplines. So we have political science, we have business majors, we have social science majors, humanities majors, and yes, engineering and computer science majors as well. So when we started the Institute for Sustainability, there was a recognition of all of those challenges, United Nations Sustainable Development Challenges that you talk about. In the United States right now, we're confronting equity, we're confronting racial justice, we're confronting inclusion. And these are being lived out before our eyes in our own communities. And these are not problems that lend themselves conveniently to any particular discipline, right? So you could be an engineer, you could be a political scientist, but you really need to get your feet in the community. That might be hard to do in a COVID world, but you need to figure out a way to talk to the local communities, to understand the history, to understand where they're coming from and where they're headed before you even propose any solution. So listening is very, very important. So what we did at our university is we created something called a sustainability minor, right? So sustainability minor has a total of 6 courses, 3 courses that we call core courses that introduces you to the concepts of sustainability, commonly used concepts, climate change, all the various things that you talked about, but also bringing in these societal challenges with sustainability, gender equity, LGBTQ, looking at sexual orientation, looking at so many different problems, but looking at all of that from a sustainability prism. And then the second course gives you a chance to practice some of those. The third course, in my mind, applied sustainability is very critical Because here what we tell the students is that they literally have to go out into the community, identify a problem, come back and propose an interdisciplinary solution to solve the problem. Now, I told you there are 6 courses. The other 3 courses can come from electives. So we have a wide range of electives. So I could be an engineer and taking a course on public policy, or I could be taking a course on green buildings, or I could be taking a course on art, right? How art sometimes, over time, when we look at it with a historical perspective, it can distort or it can illuminate, right? So how do you look at art? How do historians present art? So this is something we've taken very, very seriously. Now, IEEE as a platform has the ability to convey the same thing. I showed you that last slide from the Tri-Engineering Summer Institute. One of the young ladies there, Vidhi, I remember her name, because on the whiteboard, she was sketching various things, right? This was the time that the Black Panther movie had come out, right? And she had sketched something there. And she said, you know, I really love art and I'm not sure I want to be an engineer. Do you think I could be an engineer? And I said, absolutely you can. I mean, we need creative people like you. Engineering is not, I mean, if I drew a diagram, I'm not a very good artist. I'd probably draw a strict diagram and draw a circuit very well. But I think sustainability derives its strength, its innate strength from multiple voices. And the more diverse voices, the more equitable opportunities we have, the better it is for all of us. And you can do this right now at NIT Surathkal or any university, any institution that you have. I just think it begins with humility, it begins with listening, begins with transparency and trust. But that's just one example, Chandran, how you can actually do sustainability beyond the commonly known things of, you know, let's address pollution, let's address climate change, let's address congestion. Let's talk about social equity, right? And this will take a lot of different minds. And I commend you for raising the question. I look forward to hearing a project from your end. Maybe the IEEE Humanitarian Activities or New Initiatives Committee would be interested in doing that, because this is our time. We are stewards of time and place, and equity and inclusion and diversity are very important. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. It's a very good solution to include arts and creativity in engineering, because, well, we do need some innovative projects. And at IEEE, we have about 40 annual projects with management, robotics, airspace, and a lot more fields. And we do try out all possible things in our available to us. And I think it's time we move on to arts and management more deeply than just technical.
So next, if you permit me, I forgot to say something. And Chandran, if
Sure,
you want to
sir.
unmute yourself, I forgot to say something. And your comment just triggered that thought in my mind, Diksha. So a few years ago, you know, this is part of our AIM Squared program that we're running at Northridge. We were noticing that students in the beginning programming class, structured programming class, there was a high failure rate, right? We were teaching Java programming and we were using the same examples. So a couple of faculty came to me and they said, you know, we have a different idea. What if we can use music to teach programming? Okay, so using examples from music to teach structured programming. And it turns out there's a really good connection between concepts in music like beat and frequency and pitch and so forth, and structured programming when you think about loops and arrays and filters, right? So we wrote a grant. We actually got funded because people said, this is unique. We want to use music to teach it. But they went way beyond that. They got the music department chair. They got music department students working on world music composition. So when you go into this lab, you can hear hip hop, you can hear reggae, you can hear salsa, you can hear Hindustani, you can hear any styles of music. But by learning music, they're also learning structured programming. So this was a 3-year project. At the end of 3 years, a class where 40% of the students were failing the class, now 80% of the students were passing the class on their first attempt, and they were coming out better educated about music. My only challenge was, because this was a project and this was funded, you know, I had to have a control section. So I had to put people in a section where they did not have access to music, and I had to put people that had access to this music. You can actually download the link. I'll put it in chat shortly. The program is called TIDES, Teaching to Improve Diversity and Equity in STEM, right? And I'll put it in chat while Diksha is coming up with the next question. So that again was a great example for me how engineers and arts and humanities can work together. So
That's quite inspiring. I mean, music and to programming, I don't think anyone here has heard of it before. So Yeah, next up is Mr. Keith Fernandez. He is one of the office bearers of Mangalore subsection. So can you please unmute yourself and ask the question?
Yeah. Hello, sir. I hope I'm
evening.
audible. Yeah.
Yes, you are.
Yeah. Okay. I think it was a very wonderful talk that you gave it to us. My question is with respect to ethics, because I personally have been associated with ethics through IUCE. I have been one of the representatives from my college to start this initiative in our college. But what I was more interested is, ethics in IEEE, because being an IEEE member, and I would like to explore that avenue as well. So with respect to that, I want to know whether the options are still open for other universities to join in, or is the India office still the point of contact for doing it done? Yeah, getting it done.
Great. Thank you very much, Keith. And thank you again for your support of the EPICS program, because as you alluded to, the EPICS program itself has been going on for well over a decade. The EPICS and IEEE India pilot, we started it as a pilot in 2018 with support from the IEEE Foundation. Personally, I'm open to it. I do not know what the outcome of this election is going to be, but that's certainly on my platform that I want to promote it. I want to see more universities in India as well as the rest of the world. Because when we called it an India pilot, we said, what if we can do this around the world? What if we can do this in China? What if we can do this in Europe, in the Middle East and Africa, and so forth? So that's definitely on my agenda. So it would require some funding to increase the number of universities that are participating in it. But that said, all the resources are freely available to you. So let's say you're interested in participating in the EPICS and IEEE India initiative, right? That pilot itself was set up in 2018 with 13 universities, but maybe you want to have a different university participate in that. I can give you the names and contact information of the staff in IEEE educational activities, as well as the volunteers, and they'll be more than happy to share those resources with you. The only thing that we need to think about as we scale this, because I truly want to see this happen around the world, is to find the resources to make it happen around the world. If you looked at my slides very closely, we said we'll provide $1,000 for each university that wants to establish this project annually, so it's $2,000. And then the university in turn needs to commit to establishing a lab to offer to students to do EPICS and IEEE projects. So if those two elements are there, I mean, an MOU is a piece of paper, Keith. We can do this, as long as we have the understanding that you have the resources. We certainly have the potential to help you wherever you are. So please do reach out to me. Keep me posted on who and where and when, and I will do everything I can to connect the dots and make it happen for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And I'm sure NITK would also be interested in this project. I can see a lot of positive responses from my members. Okay, so the next question is, it's a witty question. So if you have heard about the scihub.tw, where we access all the research papers if we don't have access to the direct DOI org. So what do you think about it? Do you think it's a wrong way to access the research papers, or is it actually benefiting all of us?
Well, I think about ILN, right? I spoke about the IEEE Learning Network. And IEEE Learning Network, the two principles are access and ease of access. Because the comment I would get from IEEE members, students, is, I know you told us to go to IEEE Explore. I have no idea where to look or what to look for, right? And we wanted to answer that question. So I'd say, to me, as a dean, I was a dean for a dozen years before I saw the light, and I said, maybe I need to go back to the faculty and do something useful. So I went back to the faculty in 2017 with my program. But jokes aside, I would tell my faculty anytime they came up and said, we have a research project, I'd say, great, you're publishing these articles and so forth. That's required for your tenure promotion. But I also want to see the impact. How many students are engaged in your project? What's the impact on your community? So those are two questions that I would always ask them. Besides your research focus, what is the broader impact of the project that you're doing? So I would say that is important. It's not the number of publications, it's the quality of the work that you do and the impact that it has. Now you realize that sometimes the impact takes a long time manifesting itself, right? because you may be doing something today and it may take centuries for some things to come up. For instance, I remember when I was working on my PhD, by the way, all of that stuff was obsolete because it's 30 years ago and the technology changes so rapidly, so none of it is relevant anymore. But 30 years ago when I was working on it, and we were looking at high-speed optical communications in that genre, saying, what can we do to increase the distance between repeaters? So can we keep the pulse completely in the optical domain and so on? So we came up with this idea of solitons, a solitary pulse, where you compensate for the nonlinearity in the fiber with the pulse shape. So the pulse continues to deform as it goes to the fiber, but eventually emerges unscathed and better looking than it did at the beginning. I wish we can do that for humanity, right? As we age, we continue to look better and better and better. If only we can make that happen. But solitons were actually observed by a person in Scotland, Cote d'Ivoire, who set up a set of differential equations, and he was observing waves in a pond, and he studied these and he came up with a mathematical analogy for these and published this well over 250 years ago. But it did not manifest itself in our space until it became optical solitons and optical pulses. And now we have transatlantic and trans-Pacific communications where you can send a pulse from Tokyo to Seattle without a repeater, right? So these things take time. And I think impact is important, but we also need to be patient and remember that just because something looks very abstract right now, it doesn't mean that it's not useful, right? Everything has value. I mean, I can't tell you, when I taught circuit students, mechanical engineering students would come to us and say, Professor Ramesh, why do we have to learn circuits? I want to be a mechanical engineer. And say, trust me, it's good for the soul.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we have Abhishek R, another one of our student members. Abhishek, please unmute yourself and ask the question.
Energy generation.
Abhishek, speak up. Your microphone's a little quiet.
Is this better now, sir?
Now it's better, yeah.
Yeah. So I had a question regarding energy generation, sustainable energy generation. So as the years pass, our population is continually increasing and our dependency on, well, electricity has gone up rapidly. And as technology is being integrated further into our lives, we tend to depend more on any source, any reliable source of electricity. But
Yes.
in India, for instance, we have a lot of energy sources, for mainly coal as a thermal power plant. But then we always keep learning about nuclear power plants or solar systems, solar energy generation systems or wind. But when it comes to the actual implementation, we see that we still tend to go for a cheaper alternative because it's more abundant. So how do we convince, or how do we end up drawing a line where we choose sustainability over financial aspect of it?
Great question, Abhishek. I appreciate that. And in fact, I don't know if the folks at IEEE Vizag recorded my talk yesterday. Wow, that's a lovely shot. You play the guitar too. That's amazing. The folks at IEEE Vizag, when I talked to them, I talked about exactly the question that you're talking about, which is it's a false dichotomy, I think, between sustainability versus what it takes to implement some of these projects. So you referred to two of them, referred to wind and solar. You also have, you think about India's coastline, we have about 7,000 kilometers of coastline in India. And this has been going on for a long time around the world. It's called ocean thermal energy conversion. So effectively what happens is you're looking at the temperature differential between the cooler seawater, which is probably 1 or 2 kilometers underneath the ocean, and the warmer ocean water, which is close to the surface, which is heated up by sunlight every day, depending on the rotation of the Earth. So if you can conceive of a system where it's a Rankine cycle, and you're thinking about a fluid, something like ammonia or propylene or something, where it is boiled by that water that is at the surface of the ocean, and then in turn the cool seawater condenses it so that you have a recycling type of thing. You have abundant energy out to you. Now the question is, how do you take this energy from the ocean, convert it sustainably, store it, and be able to use it when and where you need it? In photonics, we have projects called dark photonics, right? So how can we utilize the photonic structures so that they can actually store the energy and make it available when it is nighttime? So there's lots and lots of ideas there. Closer to home, My son's an electrical engineer like me, and for his senior design project, this is about 6 or 7 years ago, they worked on a project called the DC House, which looks at wind, solar. Uh, it also looks at hydro. So let's say you're in a remote part of the world that doesn't have access to the transmission grid, but you have a small stream flowing nearby. How can you harness the hydropower and convert that to electrical energy? Or even simply a swing set, right? Or a seesaw set. How can you take the rotary energy, physical exercise, converting that to it? So a lot of this goes back to storage. So at a very high level, the challenge here is that public policy, public leadership needs to make a commitment to renewable energy. In California, if you're watching the news, our governor came out 2 weeks ago and said by 2035, all cars need to be powered by electricity. So that's not a typo. By 2035, all cars need to be powered by electricity. So immediately the questions are flying left, right, and center, saying, well, we have these forest fires and we don't have enough electricity the power grid is shutting down. How are we going to produce the electricity? Guess what? IEEE engineers to the fore. We are going to figure it out, right? We have to come up with the renewable sources because, as you rightfully said, fossil fuel sources are not unlimited. We have to come up with the answers. But I truly believe the answers are going to be in storage technology. If you listen to my talk yesterday with IEEE by ZAG, I gave 3 examples from my own campus. We have a fuel cell on my campus where the students actually designed a rainforest to sequester the carbon from the fuel cell. It's a molten carbonate fuel cell. The gas is the feedstock with a combined efficiency of about 80%. We have concentrated photovoltaics, triple junction silicon, 20 foot by 8 foot arrays. The phase 3 project that we did with the Department of Energy and Boeing, where these are mounted. And I noticed you're a guitar player, but if you can put music to this, you would literally see these arrays dancing to the music and tracking the sun. And then we have batteries that can store this so that when the grid is overloaded, right, during the summer when it hits 120 degrees, and we say, we need to detach from the grid and use our own renewable sources, we have the capacity to do that. But it takes resolve, Abhishek, it takes resolve. And COVID-19 in a way has taught us that because we need to be locally sustainable. We need to be because we don't have enough energy. I mean, if we just keep tapping fossil fuels, we're going to see more forest fires, we're going to see more hurricanes, we're going to see more floods. This is going to happen sooner than later. So it is absolutely important from my perspective that we make a commitment to it at the leadership level. We need people like you to run for office. We need you to be members of parliament. We need you to be prime ministers and chief ministers and presidents of your countries. Yes, you can be an engineer, but you can also lead. And you need to lead with your mind. You need to lead with transparency and openness because it's a false dichotomy talking about sustainability and what it costs to do it. It can be done affordably. It can be done accessibly. We just need to set our minds to it. We can do it.
Thank you. So I had one question to follow up with that. It's not related, but then you said teamwork generally brings you solutions to almost many problems that we face in our day-to-day life. But my question is, when you take opinions from different people, to a limit, it makes sense to get a diverse array of information and thoughts on a similar thing that all of you want to solve together. For example, let's take this energy generation thing itself. So let's say in NITK we have 50 people and I take opinions from all of them. Now, beyond 15, maybe 20 people, I genuinely feel that the ideas are going to get a bit redundant because everyone else is going to be thinking more or less the same thing. I'm not saying they won't innovate anything new, but the likelihood of that is less. I'm not talking with a localized perspective, but in general, when you ask for ideas or solutions for anyone or from anywhere for that matter. So my question is, you said you have to take a diverse field of opinions. So that means you will have to ask a lot of people. You will have to work with a lot of people. But my question is, after a point, it just becomes noise rather than giving you any information that's viable or important. So where do you draw that line where you go, this is enough, this is all I need?
That's a good question. And you're really going to the fundamental notion of diversity. And see, I see diversity as being very open, right? Open and transparent. And yes, noise is one of the consequences of that because you're going to hear different voices. And I personally, do not believe that any one group at any one time can predict what is going to happen in the future, right? Because resources are changing, problems are changing. whatever resources you apply to a problem today may or may not be relevant in the future, Abhishek. So having a platform where you can have this respectful dialogue, but then having a group of people with the currently available knowledge to vet that information. So using your example, if you have 50 students participating, incidentally, I have 150 students in my cohort, and I'm actually running this right now. So we have conversations. I have town halls with my 150 students, and we talk about different things. And we have different rooms where we go in, debate it, discuss it, and nobody comes in assuming that their idea is the best idea. They're all looking at the problem and saying, how can we solve this? And I always tell my students, if you find that a particular viewpoint, no matter how extreme it is not being discussed, you probably should create a conversation for that. Yes, it'll lead to a lot of noise, but remember what I said about patience, right? It takes patience, because that lone voice might actually be the solution that we need. Now, as engineers, we have a lot of tools, right? We can cut through the noise. Think about Monte Carlo simulation. Think about spread spectrum communications. We can cut through the noise and get to the answers that we need in order to get where we are. But we always have to be humble enough to realize that the answer is only relevant to that time frame. And we get strength from diversity. Yes, it may be noisy. Yes, it might be challenging to arrive at that solution. But the more voices you bring to the table, the more robust your solution is going to be. You know, in my own field, when I did my master's, I worked on public key cryptography. And the things that I worked on are completely obsolete, right? But later on, things came up which go back to some fundamental things that I did, which are now the basis of what we use in the RSA algorithm, right? And I had a very small part of that, you know, probably just 1 or 2 lines of code. But the point that I'm making is, at the time you're working on these, it's very hard for us to look 10, 15, 20 years down the road. So we just need to be humble about it and understand that all voices are important, no matter how different they are. I mean, we haven't even talked about, you know, perspectives that might just be far right or far left, right? I mean, you hear that on the political spectrum. And we still have to have a platform to have the dialogue, because shutting down dialogue, I don't think is the way to address the challenges that we have. The more open dialogues we have, because I believe in humanity. I believe in advancing technology for humanity. IEEE has not gotten to this point by restricting opinions. IEEE has gotten to this point by really making it open and available. Try it. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Thank you, sir. I will try it.
Si se puede, as my students would say. Yes, we can.
Thank you, sir. That was very insightful. Okay, so we are actually running late in time. I'll ask one last question, a crisp question on what do you consider are the chances of Indian students coming to US for higher studies? Given all the this new world, we are very, very confused. What are your thoughts on it?
No, that's a fair question, Diksha. And this applies, you know, in my university, obviously, we have a lot of students from India, graduate students, who are, on the one hand, looking at the policies, looking to see how they can you know, continue their studies with the policies. For example, in the US, if you're an international student, you need to be taking classes in person, right? I mean, that is one of the requirements. But most of our universities are online. So how can you, as an international student, come here and take a class in person when the university is not even offering it, right? So how do you do that? I mean, there's just a chicken and egg type of problem. But those problems aside, I think those are policy problems that people in government and public policy can address. What I think you really need to be asking yourself, you know, I told you about how IEEE inspired me to get into fiber optics, and that led me to apply to graduate school and so forth. And I ended up in the United States, got an assistantship, teaching assistant, ultimately led me to my career, is to really look at what you really want to do, right? Remember those skill sets needed for the future slide that I shared with you? Teamwork, communications, interdisciplinary work. So now that you're about to graduate, what would you really like to do, right? Really, really like to do. And I think you need an honest answer to this. Now, if you can answer that, and if the answer is, you know, I love solving problems, I love working with other people, yes, our programs in the United States are very hands-on, and so are the programs around the world. You can go to Australia, you can go to the United Kingdom, you can go to Turkey. You know, I visited schools all over the world because one of the hats that I wear is on the ABET Board of Directors, Accreditation Board of Engineering and Technology, where we look at criteria, right? So I've seen amazing programs around the world, graduate and undergraduate programs. So yes, the United States still has wonderful programs because I believe our programs are holistic because no matter what discipline you're in, we have this component called a general education component, but it's not just on paper, Diksha. It's something that we take seriously with projects that integrate everything that you learn and projects that will increasingly become important in a post-COVID world. So to answer your question, if that resonates with you, by all means, look at universities here. You do not have to just go to a big name school. Find a school that cares about the programs that you're interested in. Find somebody who's working there and have an honest conversation with them. IEEE has a great resource for you. It's called tryengineering.org. So go to tryengineering.org. It's free. There are no pop-ups, I promise you. And you can look at universities there and look at all the different universities, all the different programs. You can actually see little vignettes from students like yourselves saying, I'm an electrical engineer, I'm a mechanical engineer, I'm a production engineer. Here's what I want to do, here's what I want to learn. So look at that for guidance, look at what faculty have to say, and then make up your mind. The other question that I did not address is the modality of learning, right? For the foreseeable future, our programs are going to be mostly virtual. A few hybrid programs, but they're mostly going to be virtual. So does it really matter where you are, right? You could be in Suratko, and you could still be taking my master's degree in assistive technology engineering. By the way, that's a shameless plug for our program. The program is going to start in spring of 2021. It brings biologists and engineers together to work on products and processes to help people. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, if you're a mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, and you want to work with biologists and neuroscientists, it's an online program, completely online. And this was done even before COVID-19, right? So we have projects like a brain control interface for wheelchair users. Some amazing, amazing programs like that. So look it up. You know, Georgia Tech has a master's degree in cybersecurity engineering, software engineering, relatively inexpensive. So the part that I'd come back to, which is, you know, would it be a good idea for students to come to the United States and learn? One of the neat things about travel is that you learn about culture, right? And you're able to understand the local customs, you're able to learn about cultures, and that to me broadens the mind. So I learned a lot. You know, I came to Illinois in the 1980s, late 1980s, and I was very fortunate because the town that I was in, the university town, the people would invite you. If it's Thanksgiving, they'd invite you to their homes if you're an international student, right? That America only exists in TV movies now. That's gone, okay? But that's the place that I came to. And so to me, that's something that you cannot replicate in a virtual environment. I know some of our folks are getting very creative. I saw a conference in Dubai, I think, where, you know how if you go to a conference and you're listening to a speaker, there's poster session outside, people are milling around with a cup of coffee and talking. What they did in this conference in Dubai is they equipped a bunch of robots with iPads, and you could manipulate these iPads from wherever you are. So Diksha, your avatar would be standing in front of a poster, and Ramesh's avatar or robot would roll up there, and the two avatars would have a conversation. It seemed very convoluted to me, quite frankly. And I said, this is very interesting. This is like the Jetsons of before, the cartoons that we used to watch when we were growing up. But I think, you know, more to the point, one of the neat things about education, global education, is the culture that you imbibe by going outside. Because when you travel, you learn so many things. When you listen, you learn so many things. And going back to values of inclusion, diversity, and equity, that's one of the biggest benefits of global education. I have a lot of students in the US who want to go to India to study. Why? Because they want to learn about Indian culture. They say it's over 5,000 years old. I want to learn about India's spiritual wealth, and I want to understand that in the context of engineering. So it goes both ways. Close your eyes and just think about who you want to be, where you want to go, and then make the best decision that is affordable to your family, because I know it costs a fortune to travel. It'll probably cost a fortune to get an education, and do what you feel is best in your life, right? And you can't go wrong. At the end of the day, the more open you are to learning, you know, with IEEE, our commitment is to make this accessible and affordable to as many people as we can. So soak it in. You know, we've got this IEEE.
Thank you. So I think that was very insightful. There were things that I didn't know about, and the robots thing at Dubai, that's amazing. MS Bhatt sir, would you like to propose?
I have one question, if you permit me.
Please.
Yes. My question is, the government of India has started the new education policy. It is trying to bring in that 2020 in 2020. One of the things that they try to address is to integrate uh, all dimensions of a human evolution into the education, in the sense that we are not looking only at technology, engineering, or science or arts and so on. They want to integrate so that a person is not judged from his marks or degree, but from his capability in terms of in terms of other dimensions, maybe sports, music, and whatnot. So if that happens from, let's say, in the early stages of education, how can we bring in IEEE into, say, 10+2 standards? Can we bring the benefits of IEEE into these by onboarding the students into IEEE?
Absolutely, Professor. But I mean, you and I didn't talk about this, right? So I just want to be clear for the audience, because on October 2nd, on the occasion of Gandhi Jayanti, I actually spoke at an event organized by All Saints College in Thiruvananthapuram, right, by Professor Jayakrishnan Divakaran. And he's setting up something called Communities of Practice. And so there were 3 speakers, and I was one of them. And I think you'll recognize the other 2 gentlemen the moment I mention their name. One of them is the Honorable Shashi Tharoor, who's a member of Parliament. And the other one is Mr. Sam Petroda, who needs no introduction to audiences in India, right? And we talked about sustainability, and we talked about the national education policy. So I see a couple of things that are key to success here. You said 10+2 at the high school level, right? That might be an immediate point for intervention. And IEEE has the resources, by the way, with our pre-university education focus and our humanitarian activities to help with that, to help with lesson plans, to help with teacher training, to help with teacher development. But I really believe it has to go even deeper than that. It has to go to elementary and middle and high school, right? So elementary school is where IEEE is beginning to invest. So in January of 2021, our Tri-Engineering portal is going to be revamped completely. We're already working on it. It's going to come up. It's going to connect in a way. If you think about a local community, so take Surathkal. So you have elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, and you have a group of engineers who live there. Some of them may be faculty, some of them may be industry practitioners. So you create this community of practice that provides professional development for teachers, that provides opportunities for engineers to understand what the challenges are in the classroom, and also allows them to understand how the material is being developed and delivered. So IEEE is very, very, very invested in this, right? Education, not just at continuing education level for our members, but also at elementary, middle, and high school level. And this is exactly the direction in which we're going. I see great opportunities for India. My solution there would be, we need more teachers, right? We need more teachers, particularly at the elementary school level, particularly at the middle school level. We recognized this in the United States a number of years ago. It's a very difficult profession, right? It's a very difficult profession. It doesn't pay very well. And yet, we need people there because they're shaping the future minds, as you said. And we can't do this in silos. We have to do this holistically across the disciplines. So we take teacher training very, very seriously. The AIM Squared program that I run is in collaboration with my College of Education. I have faculty and students from our doctoral program in Education Leadership and Policy Studies who are part of my program. They do the assessment, they do the evaluation, and they inform us, faculty and engineering, about what they find out in terms of implicit biases, in terms of how we develop the curriculum, how we can go about engaging students. So I'd say we need to continue along the path. We need to continue to do more of that to make a difference.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Diksha?
Sure. So you can go ahead. I think we are end of
So with that, we come to the end of the talk and question and answer sessions. Then it is my present duty to thank our speaker. It was a wonderful talk by Professor SK Ramesh on engineering the future in the post-COVID era. He gave an incredible account of how things are changing due to COVID-19, changing for the better. and how IEEE is converting these challenges into opportunities for the betterment of humanity. He touched upon various opportunities that COVID-19 has offered to us. It's indeed a very motivating talk in these challenging times. And he talked about the core values of IEEE and the impact of technological innovations on society and how the members and volunteers of IEEE can make a positive change in the lives of people. On behalf of IEEE Mangalore subsection, NITK IEEE Student Branch, and all present here, I profusely thank Professor Ramesh for this incredible talk. Thank you very much, sir.
Professor
We'll
Bhatt, yeah, thank you. Before we leave, we were doing this in Suratgal. You know what would happen at this point? We would all gather in front of the auditorium or stage and take a group photo. So it'd be wonderful if we can take a group photograph right here with all of you on this call. So people can turn on their cameras, those who are not shy, and we can use your favorite IEEE slogan to get a shot.
So we look forward to having closer engagement with Professor Ramesh, the IEEE, and the California State University in addressing the challenges, as well as other humanitarian challenges. On behalf of all of you, I wish Professor Ramesh wins the IEEE President post for 2021 and takes IEEE to even greater heights. Thank you once again, and best wishes to you, Professor Ramesh.
Thank you, Professor Bhatt. Thank you, Diksha. Thank you, all the attendees, Arpita, for the introduction, your thoughtful comments, and let's get this going. How many engineers does it take to take a photograph?
Yeah.
Okay, everyone can switch on your camera for a second.
There are multiple screens, Diksha, you might want to take, and please share them with me later, okay? So,
yeah, I'm sure I'll do it.
I mean, this is a part of the meeting that I really like, seeing everybody who's out there at the other end. So thank you.
Okay, here we go. Say IEEE.
IE.
Okay, one more. Sure. Thanks, everyone.
Diksha, may I share a little joke with you before you leave?
Sure.
So in Region 9 in Latin America, IEEE is actually called EAAA because the letter I is pronounced as E and the letter E is pronounced as A. So we were in Colombia for a teacher in service program workshop, and we were taking a group shot just like this. And somebody said, I said, let's say IEEE, and they all said EAAA. I was the only guy shouting IEEE. Everybody said EAAA. Have a great evening. Wonderful day ahead. Great week ahead. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much.